When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Salome, brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. Very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They'd been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who has been crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there's the place that they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. That's the ending of Mark. It goes on for a few more verses, but those verses were not included in the earliest transcripts of our Bible. In other words, they were added on later, because that's a jarring ending, and it was so jarring that someone at some point felt that they needed to extend it and make it less jarring. And I'm really delighted that that's the passage for this year for Easter, because this is a really jarring time, and life does not feel positive, but I do think it's a very resurrectional feeling time. I know personally, I'm quite disappointed this weekend. We had a big Sunday planned. Just if you're watching from further afield for whatever reason, locally the case numbers have been very low. We're one of the safest places in Canada to be living right now, and life was returning to normalcy. We were vaccinating people, the cases were low. It seemed like things were going in a positive direction, even if they weren't necessarily around us. And so this Sunday, we figured out how to do communion safely during the pandemic. So we were going to do communion, and we were going to have our singing trio sing this Sunday. We talked to the health unit and figured out how we can space them and do everything safely enough to sing. We were going to put our hearts in the Heart Garden, which is an Indigenous reconciliation gesture that we're doing. And we were going to accept new members. This was going to be a big Sunday, and I was really looking forward to it. Also, a couple weeks ago, the United Church minister here in town emailed me and said, "Would you like to do a Good Friday service?" And, I kind of thought that if we're going to do a Good Friday service, we really need to do an Easter sunrise service as well. We need to tie Good Friday to Easter this year in particular, and that's kind of what I'm talking about today, even though we didn't get to do it. And what I was really hoping to do, we were going to walk the cross through town. Here in Tweed, we walk the cross through town, and we stop at various important community places, and we pray for that community place. And actually, the Walk of the Cross is one of my favorite things here in Tweed, because we, one of the people that was instrumental in the Walk of the Cross, until he died a few years ago, was a prominent member of the community around the Tweedsmuir, which is a bar here in town, and a bit of a rough one, if we're being honest. And so we used to stop, and we'd go into the Tweedsmuir, and we would pray, and it was welcome, or at least we thought so. And it was just really nice. Like, it was just this, like, such an all-encompassing sense of community when we would walk through the town and pray for each sort of part of the town. We pray at the school for education and children, and at the municipal office for politics, and at the bar for just community. I really enjoyed it. And then so what we were going to do was we were going to walk the cross through town down to the park, and then we were going to pray over stones, and we were going to sort of imbue in the stones, whatever word you want to use, all of our frustrations for the last year, and we were going to throw them in the lake. We were going to sort of have a little Good Friday rock skipping party. And then on Sunday, we were going to come back to that same spot, And outside is sort of the safety valve right now. We've been stuck inside all winter, but with COVID, you can do things outside, and we've been using the park over the year to sort of have some semblance of community, and so that's why I was excited about being outside. Anyway, on Sunday we were going to proclaim the resurrection. These stones would symbolize the death of the things that need to die, and on Sunday we were going to proclaim the resurrection. And a woman in the congregation made us some abstract art, and little 5x10 or 5x8 or something cards with painting and coloring on them and everything. And she was going to pass them around, and that was going to be our symbol of new life. But also it's abstract art. It's a mystery. We don't know what the future holds. And then after that, we were going to, just the Presbyterians, and we're going to gather in our congregation, and we were going to do our usual thing. I was really looking forward to it. It was going to be a good day. And here I am, like you, the government's trying not to say lockdown, but it's a lockdown. Anyway, I won't get into politics, but here we are locked down, not doing that. And it just... for me, the feeling of our hope being dashed so completely is really strong right now. When we started planning all this 3-4 weeks ago, there was 2 cases of COVID-19 in our health region, which is about 160,000 people. It's 2 cases. Today, I just checked before this video, there's 89 cases, which is by far the highest it's ever been. Here in Hastings, Prince Edward. There's 2 in the ICU. And I want you to think about that. In Belleville Hospital, I think there's about 6 or 7 ICU beds. There's probably about the same in Trenton. I don't know what the case in the small hospitals in Picton and Bancroft are. But, there's probably only about 12 ICU beds. And people are still having heart attacks. They're still getting into car accidents. There's still, and for the first time, we've got multiple people in the ICU. We've got 2 people just in hospital, and then 2 people in intensive care, when usually we have none. And the capacity is not large for intensive care. Our case rate is 52.2. I remember a few months ago, I guess it was at Christmas, when we went from yellow to orange, and it just seemed unimaginable, and that case rate was like 30. I think the threshold for that was 30. At 52.2, that's at least putting us in the red, if not lockdown. The lockdown is a combination of ICU capacity and case rate and some other things. But, this is very serious, and I think very serious for the first time here in Hastings County. We have been largely left out of what a lot of our neighbors are dealing with. But it's very serious right now. And these new variants are making people a lot sicker, and healthier people are getting sicker. It's scary. But the good news, the other side of it, is that 30,000 people have been vaccinated, and we've been at it for 3-4 weeks? And they've managed to vaccinate 30,000 rural people. This is a huge health region. It's probably 200 kilometers from top to bottom, if not more. It'd take to drive from Prince Edward Point to Whitney. That'd be like a 4-hour drive on back roads and things. This is a huge area, and we've vaccinated 30,000 people in short order. I also want to say that, I've been doing some homework on how the vaccination came to be, and the fact that we are doing vaccinations right now is nothing short of a miracle. Because usually I think it's a 10-year turnaround on vaccinations, and it just happened that someone was doing some research that nobody really cared about anymore. I think he was sort of off in a corner doing it. That was left over, I think, from the SARS outbreak in 2003. And it just happened that his research translated to this. And so, what should have taken many, many years to develop these vaccines, he'd unknowingly done a lot of the legwork. That's miraculous. The fact that here in Hastings County and Prince Edward County, we have put vaccinated 30,000 people when we shouldn't even have a vaccination yet. And I'm talking about all of this because I think this is particularly poignant at Easter. Last week, I sort of purposefully leaned into the negative, the hard side of it, because you can't have resurrection without death. And so often we want to be positive people. We don't want to be negative. We want to focus on what we can do, not what we can't do. We want to focus on the good, not the bad. And I think that's really admirable. But you can't have change without feeling the need for change. And I think that's really what the resurrection was about. Last week, I made the point that if any single group or person had have done something different in the things leading up to Jesus' death, he wouldn't have died. And sort of the point of bringing that up is the fact that, if enough people had have done something different, had have done what was clearly the right thing, we wouldn't have needed that. We wouldn't have needed that to be pointed out, how unjust the world was. But Jesus' death is about pointing out just how unfair, unjust, etc. the world that we've created is, and how in need of change we are. And so without focusing on that need for change, we're not going to change. We don't get to the resurrection without the death. And so today we're talking about the other side of that. We're moving to the positive on a week that things don't seem that positive. But frankly, I still think they are. I am very disappointed. But I want to make a differentiation between short-term and long-term. I'm not a health professional. I've even gone on record saying that I'm not making predictions about this pandemic anymore, because as soon as I say something, the opposite happens. But clearly we're vaccinating people. We're vaccinating them quickly. It sounds like there may be some these new strains may be vaccine resistant, but I think that's just a booster to do that. We have the technology to fix this. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But we're past the middle. Whatever that means. Excuse me. I don't know what that means. But the fact that we have to stay home when we thought we were sort of moving out of the hard part, the fact that this is getting so much worse, yes, that's bad. But I don't want you to lose focus on the good. We're getting there. We're almost there. And, I made the case, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but I think it's particularly poignant around Easter because, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, this was all snow. And those that are familiar with our place know that we get snow about a week longer or 2 weeks longer than they do even just out on the highway, just because we're so shaded here. But, this was snow a week or two ago. And now here I am sitting out here in a sweater. And, we're moving into spring. And it's no coincidence that Easter's in spring. That's symbolic. So we're moving into this new season. We're celebrating resurrection after death. And we're moving into this new era this new stage in the pandemic. Mark, when he finishes his gospel, he doesn't give us details. He just says, there was a guy in the tomb that said Jesus isn't here, he's been resurrected, and people run away in terror. And they don't tell anybody. That's it. That's all Mark gives us. Mark doesn't tell us what resurrection looks like. Matthew and Luke are sort of there to give the definitive accounts. There's all kinds of stuff after the resurrection. And John is more of a theological, poetic expression. He's not a historian, so he's doing something else. And so he talks about things that happen afterwards. But Mark he was just the first to write things down, or the first that we have in the Bible. He was sort of scrambling to get a written record, and that's where he ends. That's good enough for Mark. And there's this sense of mystery after the resurrection. There's no assurance that it happened. There's no there's no details. It happens, and that mystery, Mary, and Salome, they ran away in fear. That mystery is terrifying. And I think we're in that same kind of position where we've sort of are experiencing this resurrection, but that's terrifying too. And I think the message of Easter this year is just that sit tight. It's happening. There's hope. And I don't want to stop at just resurrection, because just being resurrected is one thing, but especially when it comes to this pandemic, and especially after this series that we've been doing through Lent on mental health, we need action too. We can't just say he's risen and then sit back down. I've said for the last year, I'm tired of saying it actually, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop saying it, that the pandemic is making us focus on the things that we need to change. And hopefully after that, we've certainly been sitting long enough to know that we need change and disrupt our habits, but hopefully after that we will be healthier. We will have focused on racism and mental health and our health system and our government and our culture and all these things, and we'll have seen the problems. We can't ignore them, and we will make change. We won't make perfect change. At the end of the day, we're humans, and we're going to continue making mistakes. But we're going to make some change. We're heading into a new era. So this pandemic, I think, has been acknowledging our need to move into something new. And I think the story of the resurrection, and even just looking at the news, despite all the trials we're going through right now, there's hope. There's a lot of hope. We are getting towards the end of this, and there's hope that we're going to build something new on the other side. And my prayer is simply that we listen to what God is telling us during this difficult time. I want to be clear, I don't think God caused this difficult time, but God uses all things to communicate with us. So what is God telling us during this time? And I pray that we have the strength to act on that. He's risen. He's risen indeed. Amen.